On April 1st, 2003, Rooster Teeth released the first episode of Red vs. Blue. The episode opens with Griffin Simmons asking a simple question: why are we here? This one question would spawn over 300 episodes of Red vs. Blue, one of the most beloved media companies on the internet, and the rebirth of a brand new art form, Machinima. I am calling it a rebirth because Machinima existed well before Red vs. Blue. Quake, made by id Software, had been used by gamers to make machinima sequences since the late 90s. One of the more notable movies from this period is Quad God, made in Quake 3 Arena. Before Quad God, Quake Machinima was shared through demo files, which required a copy of either Quake or Quake 2 to be played. Quad God was revolutionary in that it was the first piece of Quake Machinima to be shared as a video instead of as a demo file. In January of 2000, Hugh Hancock created Machinima.com, which would officially give the art form a name. The term machinima is meant to be a fusion of the words machine and cinema, and it was originally supposed to be machinima, but Hancock would change it after misspelling the term in an email. Machinima.com would host numerous articles, tutorials, and interviews with prominent machinimators. However, for the most part, machinima would stay relatively niche and unknown to the wider internet. In an interview with GameSpy in 2004, Matt Hullum, one of the founding members of Rooster Teeth, would state that they had no idea the wider machinima movement existed. They thought what they were doing was completely original. They didn't know that was an art form with a proper name, or that there was an official company and website behind it. Hullum may not have known about the wider machinima movement, but that doesn't mean they weren't original. Most of the old Quake films were self-referential in that they were typically about the game itself. This limited the audience these films could reach, as you had to have prior knowledge of Quake in order to properly view and enjoy the video. Red vs. Blue was different in that the series leans more on humor about general bureaucracy and basic ineptitude. Anybody who's ever held down a job before has had to deal with an incompetent manager or an annoying coworker. As such, this more grounded approach to storytelling and comedy would massively open up the kind of audience the show could reach. The difference between Quad God and Red vs. Blue is that Quad God is about Quake, but RVB is not about Halo. The show makes references to events, people, and entities from the wider Halo canon, but for the most part the events of Halo are completely divorced from the events of RVB. The Human Covenant War may be the origin point for Project Freelancer, but we never see the war itself in the show, or hear about it in any great detail. To put it in other terms, Red vs. Blue didn't stand out on novelty alone the way the Quake films did. It stood out because it had decent writing and humor that could be understood by anybody, even people who didn't play Halo. It was accessible to more people, at a higher bar of quality. Now, I'm not going to recount the full history of RVB to you. There are other videos and Wikipedia articles that could do that for you. My interest in making this video is in analyzing the art form of making Halo Machinima, real top-tier pretentious film critic stuff. I'm here to examine RVB primarily, but we'll also be looking at newer Machinima productions as a comparison. First, let's get into some basics. Machinima is a very limited medium of filmmaking. Character interactions and expressions are limited, and Halo in particular requires everyone to always be holding a rifle.
Do it. What? Drop your gun. No! Why not? I don't want to. You don't want to? Or you can't?
This immediately limits the stories that can be told in Halo Machinima to only be sci-fi settings existing alongside or adjacent to the Halo universe. One way to get around the limited expression is through animation. Starting in Season 8, Red vs. Blue will begin using animated sequences for fight scenes. These massively ramped up the action and intensity of the show. As the show progressed, later seasons would begin further utilizing animation. These sequences would elevate the scenes they were used in, adding more depth to performances, more so than pure Machinima could achieve. As a non-RVB example, let's take a look at Crash in one of its animated sequences. On the left is an animated scene from Episode 6, and on the right is my attempt at recreating it with Machinima. The animated sequence carries far more weight to it than the Machinimated one does. The simple tactic of giving a character better body language heightens the scene to another level. The obvious drawback here is that animation is expensive and extremely time-consuming. If it were easy, you'd be animating the whole show, not machinimating. When animation isn't used, a side effect of the limited expressions offered by Machinima is that voice actor roles become far more important to a performance. You can express quite a lot by bobbing a helmet up and down, but more complex things such as body language and facial expressions are severely handicapped. Traditional animation also relies heavily on its voice actors, but animation can telegraph a performance far better. This is done through the use of detailed facial expressions and movements that were storyboarded out well in advance. Speaking of voice performances, every Halo Machinima ever made has the same helmet radio effect put over its dialogue. When Rooster Teeth was recording the lines for Season 1 of RVB, half the cast was living outside of Austin, Texas, where the company was based. Matt Hullum, Kathleen Zolch, Joel Heyman, Gustavo Sorolla, and Jason Saldana all recorded their lines over a phone call. Naturally, this resulted in some less than stellar audio quality. The quality of the recordings would make it sound as if the characters were speaking through a radio. Rather than try to fix it, Rooster Teeth decided to lead into it. This terrible audio quality would then set a precedent for all Halo Machinima going forward. All dialogue would have filters put on it to make it sound like it was being transmitted via radio. This helmet radio effect is so ubiquitous in Halo Machinima that hearing dialogue in a Machinima without it feels fundamentally wrong. Something that is both a blessing and a curse within Halo Machinima is character design. Speaking on Halo 3 specifically, the character design and the armor always look fantastic all the time, so you don't need to worry too much about costumes looking good. However, when compared to modern titles, character customization in Halo 3 is pretty limited. Some modern Machinima shows, such as Guard Duty, have been utilizing the new armor added to Halo 3 in recent years. However, they give this newer armor exclusively to Spartan characters and leave everyone else with the original Bungie armor. Crash, on the other hand, chooses to stick with the original Bungie armor for all characters. This maintains a better visual coherence, but it also puts a bit of a handicap on the ability to customize. The flip side of this is that over the years, a distinct visual code has evolved in Halo Machinima. For example, most characters will wear the base Mark 6 Mjolnir armor, but only the main characters in the show wear the Mark 6 helmet. Regular UNSC grunts wear an ODST helmet. This also means that Master Chief, the protagonist of the Halo games, cannot exist in any Machinima production that follows this design ethos. The Mark 6 helmet is his most recognizable feature, and giving it to everyone else makes him look like just another guy. This characterization also extends to the weapons that characters have. The leaders of both Red Team and Fixer Team carry shotguns. The shotgun is a symbol of their authority. Nobody else on their team carries one. It is theirs alone. A better example would be the plasma pistol. As many of you may already know, the plasma pistol in RVB is not a weapon. It's a medical device of some kind. If you see a character holding one, chances are they're either a doctor or a medic. It's also because we're purple. When it comes to set design, there are also some sizable limitations. Halo only has so many maps, and you can only go so far with them. The spaces in Halo can be confining at times, but there are ways to get around it. One method involves one of the oldest filmmaking tricks in the book, creative geography. Something which I will now demonstrate for you. Put simply, creative geography is the practice of bending real space so that you can create layouts and sets that don't actually exist. Isolation and Valhalla are two completely different maps, but you can make them appear to be connected through an editing trick. When watching my demonstration, you were probably thinking of this sequence from RVB Season 8, where a similar effect is achieved. However, they get to kind of cheat here through the use of visual effects. A better example of creative geography in RVB can be found in Season 12. This is Longbow, also known as Federal Army of Course Outpost 37 from Season 12 of RVB. Over here is the wall where Simmons, Griff, Tucker, and Caboose debate how to get into the base, supplemented with some walls put down in Forge mode. And if we take a short trip over this way, we can see the basement the gang falls into after Tucker melts the ice. The editing leads you to believe that the tunnel is underneath the wall, but in reality is at the same elevation and much further away. Editing tricks can only take you so far, however, and at some point you will need to broaden your horizons. Again, looking at Crash, they handle this by taking full advantage of the Master Chief Collection's modding tools in order to bring firefight levels from ODST into Halo 3. They also use the tools to bring in new character designs in the form of the cops from ODST and the insurrectionists from Reach. A side effect of only using environments from a game in your show is that those environments become directly tied to the show itself. Maps such as Exile, Valhalla, and Blood Gulch are so incredibly ingrained in the minds of RVB fans that these places are no longer just maps in a video game. I'd now like to speak about the maps, Red vs. Blue, and Halo itself on a more personal note for now. I was too young for my parents, mostly my mother, to let me play Halo during the golden age of Halo 3 and Halo Reach. When I was finally allowed to play Halo 3 ODST, the year was 2016, and I had just turned 13. Does that make you feel old? Good. I played ODST over and over. I knew the streets of New Mombasa like the back of my own hand. Later that year, I would discover Red vs. Blue through Netflix, and I fell in love with the show. I still had yet to play any of the mainline Halo games by the time I discovered the show, so in many ways, Red vs. Blue was my first proper introduction to Halo. I had played Halo 3 briefly at my uncle's house a few years beforehand, but that was a distant memory. For me, Red vs. Blue was Halo. It was like Plato's Cave but with Space Marines. I rewatched the show over and over. As a teenager wanting to prove I could be mature and watch cool adult shows, it was the only thing I talked about. If I had known what an OC was, I guarantee you I would have made a freelancer OC. And every time I rewatched the show, the characters and the locations were further ingrained into my mind. By the time I got my next Halo game, Halo 4, I would start Wojak pointing at the screen whenever I recognized a place from RVB. This temple in the middle of Vortex is where the battle for the Com Temple took place. This melted reactor in Perdition is where Donald Doyle sacrificed himself for his people. And this back area of Vertigo is where Washington got his shit clocked by locusts. The best way I could think to describe the feeling I got is like seeing a movie set in person. The Blob, released in 1958, was filmed in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, which is only a short drive from where I live. The iconic theater run scene was filmed at the Colonial Theater on Bridge Street. That theater is still here. You could go to the theater and see the exact spot where people were running in terror from the Blob. Granted, it looks a bit different now because the Blob was filmed 60 years ago. Halo doesn't have that problem though. Blood Gulch still looks like Blood Gulch 20 years later, and I guarantee you in 60 years, I'll be pointing out to the care staff at my retirement home where Tucker gave birth to an alien baby in Season 5. On the other hand, Halo 5 doesn't really give me that same feeling. The main reason is that by the time Season 15 released, I had sunk at least 100 or so hours into Halo 5. The maps in Halo 5 aren't connected to RVB for me because they're already connected to my own memories. This platform on Molten, where I jumped off like an idiot that one time, is also where Griffin Simmons left Gene to hang. This walkway on the rig, where I scored my first ever overkill, is also where Sarge and Surge have their Southern accent convention. The same can be said for Seasons 16 and 17. By this point, the production team had been taking full advantage of Forge Mode to create their own wholly unique environments. Seasons 16 and 17 barely utilized the stock maps, therefore there's nothing to get attached to in the same way. I can say the same for Halo Infinite as well. There's only one stock map used throughout the whole 70-minute runtime of Red vs. Blue Restoration, that map being High Power, and the rest of the environments were all made with Forge. I also have my own separate problems with Restoration separate from environment design, but that's a topic for another video. So, like and subscribe. Getting back on track, it's time we look at the bigger picture here. We've looked at costume designs, environments, audio design, and animation. When you put everything together, what is the big picture? What is Machinima in the world of filmmaking? In my opinion, Machinima is a shortcut. Machinima is great because it does the bulk of the work for you. It won't help you if you can't write good jokes or stories, but it can be a powerful tool when used properly, and it's no different from any other filmmaking shortcut. If color film stock is too expensive, you shoot on black and white. If you have less than 3 weeks to shoot a whole-ass movie, shoot on a zoom lens so you don't waste time on lens changes. If you're autistic and have trouble maintaining eye contact with a camera for extended periods of time, film your video essay as a machinima. With that out of the way, there is still one last piece to this puzzle that we must consider. That piece is a question. What makes Red vs. Blue so special? Why did it, of all things, get to stand out? Well, if you've been paying attention, you already know the answer. On November 15th, 2001, Halo Combat Evolved was released for the original Xbox. Nowadays, Halo is credited with bringing the FPS genre to consoles, a genre which historically belonged to PC. Bungie took a genre that was known for things like Doom and Quake, PC-only games that had intense multiplayer scenes, and bringing it to console. The first-person shooter genre as we know it would not exist without Halo. The reason why Red vs. Blue gets to stand out is because Rooster Teeth did for Machinima what Bungie did for first-person shooters. They made the medium more accessible to a larger audience. For Bungie, that audience was console players, and for Rooster Teeth, that audience was people who didn't play video games. Bungie has made a habit of taking mechanics and ideas from other genres and turning them more widespread. Marathon was one of the first FPS games you could freelook in. Halo 1 brought the shooter genre to console, and Halo 2 leveraged Xbox Live to create one of the most memorable multiplayer games of all time. Destiny took MMO mechanics from games like World of Warcraft and simplified them for use in the shooter. This would kick off not only the live service model for video games, but also a slew of games like Anthem positioned to be the Destiny killers. And now they're trying to do the same thing again with the Marathon reboot and the extraction shooter genre, though we'll see how that one plays out. Rooster Teeth took Machinima and gave it a boost in quality. The writing and the comedy alone carried RVB to be one of the most successful internet series ever, of all time. Rooster Teeth didn't realize it at the time, but they were following the example that Bungie set for them. This video would not have been possible without rtarchive.org. During 2023, in a bid to push more people to the RT site, most of Red vs. Blue was privated on YouTube. RT Archive has done the thankless task of preserving Red vs. Blue and all the other Rooster Teeth content they could find. Thank you, RT Archive, for your tireless efforts. Hello. This terrible quecedent. Mpreg is wild, man. Oh, I know what the ladies like. They like being treated like a person, not a fucking sex object. Touch some grass, Marine. Red vs. Blue was different in that the series leans more on humor about general bureaucracy. Red vs. Blue was different in that the series leans more on humor about general bureaucracy and basic ineptitude. Fuck. It's also because we're purple. I do not sound like Doc. Fuck me. Does that make you feel old? Good. Bitch. And this back area of Vertigo is where Washington got his shit clocked by Lopez. That's not it. Pendejo. Donde está biblioteca? This is Longbow, also known as Federal Army of Course Outpost 37 from Season 12 of RVB. And it's at this point where I realized that I wrote chorus as Kraus in my script. I have proofread this 7 times.